It's taken me a very long time, honestly, to build my framework on souls. The nature of our soul is a very deep and complicated section where you can study basically your whole life if you really wanted to. And I'm really just at the tip of the iceberg here, but I felt like I have learned enough that I can share some things that have been really impactful in my life. And it comes down to how we interpret the world around us. And the more and more I learn about the nature of our souls, the more and more I understand how crucial it is that we frame our experience of life in a certain context so that we can help facilitate the soul's experience of life. And when I mean facilitate, I mean that the soul can feel an experience of life that is more centered around love and appreciation than a lot of the other ways that we feel and experience life, which can typically be anger and frustration or other forms of negative emotion patterns. So in today's video, we're going to talk a lot about at the soul level what's going on and how it receives sensory information, how our minds process it, and how that affects the soul's experience of life. So let's jump on into how the soul experiences life. Alright, so most of us have heard of soul, and I like to kind of think about it as the core bundle of energy and information that makes up all of who we are. This is, in my opinion, part of mind and body, and a lot of spiritual teachings and whatnot like to separate that, and we're going to do that in this video because it helps us demonstrate the flow of information from when it is received by a sensory input, how it's processed, and how it's received by the soul. But I want to make clear that I feel that the soul, or the self, is a bundle of energy and information at the core. That's all it is. It doesn't have the senses of sight, of taste, of smell, of hearing. It doesn't have that experience of life. In fact, the experience of life that is around sensory information is what we perceive. That isn't actually what at the core level is going on here. And in future videos, we're going to be talking about the quantum physics of things in the universe, and we'll be able to gain a better understanding of why. The core of our being is our soul. And our soul doesn't have the sense of taste, of touch, of sight, of hearing, and whatnot. Instead, the soul feels, at the core, our experience of life. And that is because the soul is just pure energy and information. So, this is a crucial point for us in this journey because we need to understand that our soul only feels the interpretations that our mind and body give it. So, let's talk about our mind and how it receives sensory information. Typically, we'll be walking throughout our day, our eyes will receive information, our hands or our touch or our smell or any of them will receive some sort of information from the external world. Our mind then processes and interprets this information. It makes decisions, it makes judgments, it plans out what to do next. It is kind of the computer system of us. Then once it's received this information and it's processed it, it is then relayed kind of energetically throughout the body. And you'll notice that that kind of comes in the form of the nervous system. So our body then, which is separate from our mind, then has some sort of connection and feeling based off of the interpretations that our mind gave it. So let's say, for example, that you're getting a massage. You might be able to feel that the massage feels really nice. But really what's happening is you're gaining sensory input. Your mind is interpreting what that input means, and maybe a sense of bodily relaxation follows. But we need to be very aware of the way that that process occurred. And it begins when you receive sensory information, and then you interpret it, and then there is some outcome that is felt by either the body or, more importantly, the soul. So let's take this a little bit further. And let's think about a time where you were really frustrated or angry with some situation or external environment that is inflicting you. What was happening there is you're receiving and you're interpreting information, and then you have a negative feeling or emotion that is correlated with that. And then your body and your soul feels that emotion. And what this can begin to do is, if you experience these emotions very frequently, is it kind of starts to begin to deteriorate your body, because it's spending so much of its time feeling negative emotions and negative energies. So, what's really important here is that because we understand this process, we can begin to shift our attention onto the process when it happens. Because at the core, our soul is just energy. It just feels the energy that is associated with what is happening in our external environment. So, why is this important to your day-to-day life? Well, there are times in every single day that we are triggered by some sort of external process, and we are only triggered because of the interpretations that we assign to that experience. We receive sensory information, we process it, we apply a certain meaning based on the context that we're in, and boom, you have a negative emotion, you might even have a positive emotion, and that's fantastic. But I want to really drill down that a lot of the problem is when we experience the negative emotions. And this whole process we're talking about in this video actually applies to all ranges of emotions. But the reason we want to be aware of this process is because we want to try to kind of eliminate those negative emotions. We don't want to push them away or ignore them or act like they don't exist, but we want to be very mindful and aware of the process that's happening in our mind when we're overlaying our judgments and our criticisms of a certain context. And this is very important because if we're aware of this process, we can affect the way that we interpret reality around us. We can become more peaceful and calm when we are faced with hardships. We can ground ourselves on the fact that it's just an interpretation, that it might seem extraordinarily real, and it is real, but we can consciously choose to create the interpretation that we want. Our mind sometimes in certain situations will suggest multiple storylines that we can go on. For example, if you are pissed off at someone, you can be like, oh, they afflicted some sort of thing against me, they are attacking me. Or we can view it as there's something emotionally going wrong in that individual and it's being projected onto me. So that's just a very simple demonstration of how we can kind of shift our perspective, shift our understanding of what's going on around us, and completely change the experience at the level of the soul. Because once we make that conscious shift in perspective, once we recognize, hey, maybe that individual's having a hard day, maybe that individual has a lot more going on in their life than we understand, we can begin to have a more patient and calm and relaxed experience of what others are doing around us and to us. And this is so beneficial because the more and more you exercise this muscle of shifting that perspective, altering the way that you're interpreting the world around you, you actually begin to have a more sense of inner calm and inner peace. So next time you drop something, next time you forget something, next time someone triggers you, I want you to pause and I want you to reflect in that moment what is bothering you. And you'll recognize that it's all sensory information that your mind is interpreting and assigning meaning to. And when you can insert your awareness into that process as it's happening, you begin to have the power to change your reality. You get to choose the storyline that your soul feels on the internal level. And some of you might be asking, why do we care about how the soul feels? And why do we even need to worry about how we're interpreting the world around us? Well, you don't really. You could sit here and you could go your whole life and nearly never care about this process or this mechanism. But in my experience of life, especially in the last couple of years, I'm getting better and better at redirecting my mind during these moments, applying a new meaning and a new interpretation to what I'm experiencing in the external world. And I've noticed a greater sense of calm, a greater sense of relaxation in the world's more trying moments. And, this isn't saying that you're just going to become invincible and you're going to effortlessly navigate everything right off the bat. It takes time. The biggest difficulty really is building in that redirect that ability to be aware that, oh, something's going wrong in my external environment and I need to choose the storyline that I want. That process of being aware that that is happening takes a little bit of time. It takes conditioning mentally to be able to say, hold up, stop, pause, let's think, let's reflect, because so many of us react. We don't really choose the storyline, we just react unconsciously. And I'm kind of arguing here that we should make this a conscious process. We should consciously choose the interpretation or storyline that we want, because this has the impact of making our soul's experience of life so much more magnificent and so much more relaxed and so much more calm. It allows you to kind of remove yourself from the situation and view things more objectively. No matter what, everything is going to be subjective by nature. Everything we're receiving information-wise is going to be interpreted. It's impossible to be purely objective in our interpretation of reality. But we can shift subtly and sometimes aggressively. We can shift our interpretation, and this has an incredible impact on your life. I guarantee you that if you move forward and you practice this in your daily life, it doesn't need to be an everyday thing and you don't need to hammer it into you, but just be aware of the process. And I can guarantee you that when you are, your life is going to begin to transform internally. People around you will begin to notice that you are so much more at peace and so much more calm and relaxed in certain states of frustration and anger that most people are very susceptible to. Anyways,